Greetings, Galactic Jedis. How is each and every single one of you guys are doing? I hope you guys are all doing fantastic. I am Ismael Perez, the Galactic Historian, best-selling author of our Cosmic Origin, once again here on this exciting live with the Galactic Jedis that are in the house. Welcome to my Monday night White Hat Report. I am excited to be here, guys. This is going to be an interesting day. First, I just wanted to state the date. Today is Monday, the 19th of February, and a day in history was on this very day, in the year 1847, the Donner Party was rescued from the Sierra Mountains in Nevada. The Donner Party, I've never even heard of them, but that's an event that took place in 1847 on this very day, February the 17th. Now, today is President's Day. Happy President's Day, everyone. Now, there is a distinction, obviously. Throughout all of history, we've seen presidents that have been puppets for the dark side. I don't want to use keywords anymore since I am on my YouTube channel. To those presidents that have been working for the light side. So let me just start off by saying that the history of the White Hats did not begin with 45, but it actually preceded him. It was reinserted back during the Eisenhower years. But if you really want to be technical, guys, it all began with the founding fathers. See, our founding fathers were the rebels in Europe. You know, for those that don't really understand the real history of our world, the founding fathers were part of a brotherhood and sisterhood where men were free to think whatever they wanted to think, to study any ideology, to be any religion they wanted. There was absolute freedom within the original Masonic networks before they became, of course, infiltrated by Adam Weishaupt and the House of Rothschild. So during the early days, the founding fathers were associated with a network that originated in Europe that I strongly believe were an offshoot of the already existing Knights Templars before their persecution. And for those that understand the true history between the battle of, the forces of good and the forces of evil, we could say that all evil, and that includes the, political ideology of absolute tyranny and control, could be traceable back to the empires, and the last of them being the Roman Empire. And in like manner, we could also say that all the people that have been opposed to that are those that believe and value freedom. And the reason why our planet never tasted a full-out dictatorship and why every empire did fall was because of the suppressed history of the White Hats, which, again, in earlier times, the White Hats were connected to the Brotherhood of Melchizedek and ultimately to the Brotherhood and Sisterhood of the Essene. So today, I would like to also, before I get started on sharing the declaration of Dwight Eisenhower, who resurrects it, who actually started the plan and reinserted what our founding fathers established in 1776 when they rebelled against the tyranny of Europe. I would like to share a little bit about myself. For those that didn't know, I actually was a rebel from the beginning. As a teenager, I rebelled against everything. I questioned my teachings, I questioned religion, and I questioned everything that was being taught to me. So I became a rebel at an early age where I decided to, join the punk rock scene. And I became, at the age of 15 and 16, I started listening to punk rock music because to me, punk rock was my way of defying the establishment. And so, anyways, that's just a little bit about myself, a little bit about my youth years. They were very rebellious. So as a kid, I was always a nonconformist, and I never quite fit in, of course, with the exception of the punkers, right? The punkers were all inclusive, and they were all about, harmony and freedom. But that's just a little bit about me. So today on President's Day, which is supposed to be a day to honor, those that have served the Republic, But unfortunately, we know, and for those that are awakened, of course, that most of our presidents, I would say, with the exception of maybe a few, um, have been puppets for the, for the globalist, for the neocons, whatever you guys want to call them. I got to be careful with my wordings here. I also want to I also want to acknowledge and give a shout out to Lisa Smith. I did read the comment right before I jumped on, and she was letting me know that she has my book and that she's loving all the knowledge in my book, Our Cosmic Origin. And so I just wanted to give her a shout out. She asked me to, and so I'm doing it. Lisa Smith, how you doing, sister? And thank you so much for being here. All right, so today let's go back to the last speech that Dwight Eisenhower gave to the American people, warning us about the what he called the military-industrial complex. For those that didn't know who the military-industrial complex are, that is a hidden group that involved corporations, big aerospace company, and of course black budget operations, things that were left, off the records, right? Classified information. So um, there was one aerospace company that was not included within the group, right, of the military industrial complex. And that was the aerospace company that was run by Howard Hughes. And so Howard Hughes um, became a big player in the fortification. I want to say in the fortification of the plan that the White Hats are actually bringing into fruition as I speak now. But let's go back to the origin of the plan. Okay. We do know that before Dwight Eisenhower, we do know that Truman was the puppet president that sold us out to the neocons, the NWO, the globalists, right? We do know that because there is classified information stating that it was President Truman who began to secretly negotiate with the neo NAZI and neo Nazis. I guess if I could say that through those that escaped the persecution, right? The Nuremberg trials through Project Paperclip. And so it was Truman who actually aligned with them and who allowed for these neocons to infiltrate our government. And of course, the OSS, which precipitated the CIA, was created, the Office of Strategic Defense, which of course later we know that it evolved into the three-letter agency, the intelligentsia that is supposedly running our country. But we also know that through the Project Paperclip, many of these scientists were also instrumental in the aerospace facility, right? They created two types of programs. They created the covert program, right, which led to the international, or what they call the interplanetary corporate conglomerate, and then of course the open program, which is what we call today NASA. So the origin of these programs also began with the neocons. So there was a huge reorganization after the Second World War between the House of Rothschilds, or what we call the international bankers, and the surviving remnants of the Nazis. And so they became after they signed new treaties and they were able to seduce, or rather manipulate, Truman, they completely signed over our Constitution to the interplanetary corporate conglomerate groups, or what we call today the corporations. So that's when all of a sudden our government was no longer an official, constitutional republic. That's when all of a sudden our government was secretly run by, not only this international synarchist group known as the international bankers, but even more so run by these off-world entities known as the Negative Gray and, of course, Draco Syndicate, that were the master puppeteers of the international financiers. So by the time President Eisenhower. Oh, and by the way, I want to give a shout out to Laura Eisenhower, who is going to be coming on my channel this Saturday. I should have left it as a surprise, but yeah, if you guys tune in Saturday for my Saturday Night Live, it's going to be me and Laura Eisenhower dropping some gems, guys. And I had an opportunity to be interviewed by her platform in the last few days, and I believe for those that are um, following her on Rumble and I believe on her website, that interview is going to be released in the next couple of days, she said. So I'm excited. I want to give her a shout out, who happens to be the great great granddaughter of Dwight Eisenhower, who, again, by the time he came into office, unfortunately, our government and our military was under the control of the military industrial complex. So, what I want to do here on President's Day is reiterate the speech that he gave regarding the exposure and the warning in his speech of the military industrial complex. Because everything he said in that speech is exactly what's been happening ever since he left us. And then, of course, we do know that following his presidency, John F. Kennedy came into office, and as a Y hat, of course, and we know what happened to him. Of course, his fate was totally intertwined with the carrying forth of the plan as he was trying to cancel out the pig of Bays in Cuba, as he was trying to completely abolish the Federal Reserve, the central banking system, and expose, of course, the secret space programs. And right when he was about to do that, following his appearance in Texas, we know what happened. In any case, I just wanted to, before I read this article, I just wanted to let JFK, who is now resting in peace, let him know that we are proud and that we stand with him even today, and his son. And we stand with the forces that are continuing and that are bringing the great plan into fruition as I speak. So we are living in the best times, Galactic Jedis. We're finally, for the first time in many, many years, the plan that was set forth by Dwight Eisenhower and Valiant Thor, our brother from planet Venus, is now coming to fruition any day now as I speak. So, with all due respect to JFK, let's go ahead and read about the speech of the late President Dwight Eisenhower. So, 62 years ago, the U.S. President Eisenhower delivered his farewell address. After 8 years in office, Eisenhower used his final words as president to deliver a very specific warning. The expanding U.S. defense establishment, he claimed, had become entangled with private industry in a way that was completely unprecedented for the United States and the world. This military industrial complex, as he named it, would distort every U.S. political institution and even threaten democracy itself. And he is correct. We've been seeing the gradual degradation of democracy and freedom, since the death of JFK. So Eisenhower's farewell speech is now the most famous address of his career, and the concept of the military-industrial complex has proven important decades later. Below are 4 excerpts from his speech that anticipated the challenges we face today. The first one is, our military organization today bears little relation to that known by any of my predecessors in peacetime. Eisenhower was a lifelong military man whose career spanned both world wars. In his lifetime, scientific and technological advances resulted in unprecedented mass destruction, completely transforming the nature of war. However, what preoccupied Eisenhower at the end of his presidency was not just the transformation of war, but also the transformation of peace. In time of war, the United States has also recruited private industry and dedicated vast resources to defense. But prior to the 20th century, peace meant a return to normal. After World War II, however, the private defense industry remained as permanent part of the economy, and baseline defense spending never returned to previous peacetime levels. This remains our reality today. The wars in the Middle East were the most expansive wars, and that's true. They were the most expensive wars in U.S. history. But now, after both wars ended, the defense budget has not gone down. In fact, it has risen to higher levels. All right, the second part is called This Conjunction of an Immense Military Establishment and a Large Arms Industry is New in the American Experience. The total influence, economic, political, and spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. The United States spends more now on defense than it has ever before, more than the next 8 countries combined, 4 of which are close to the U.S. allies. But defense spending doesn't happen in a vacuum. Each dollar spent on defense is a dollar that could instead be spent on healthcare, on education, and sustainability, which is something that 45 wants to do. He wants to take all of our tax-paying money that is going to, these fomented wars that they start, of course, right? The deep state. And he wants to bring that back in order to rebuild our infrastructure. It's very, very, very petty that, as stated by Carlson, right? When he went over to Moscow and he saw how beautiful their cities was, he saw the cost of living in Russia was so much better than here. Well, that explains it, right? That explains it because our country has been, there's been this agenda to eventually destroy the economic infrastructure and hence the middle class ever since, of course, the military-industrial complex came into power. Well, let's continue. So how can we find more resources every year for the Department of Defense, the only federal agency that can even pass an audit, but we cannot find the money to pay for hungry children to eat? So Martin Luther King Jr. said, a nation that continues years after years to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual doom. The federal budget is an expression, perhaps the most concrete and measurable expression of the values and priorities of the United States government. What the federal budget expresses today is an insult to human dignity. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. This was all taken from the speech given by the late President Dwight Eisenhower before he stepped out of office. This was his warning to the American people regarding this deep state that is known and was known as the military-industrial complex. For those that are just tuning in, all right, so let me continue. The defense sector is one of the most powerful industries in politics. During the 2022 election, the industry spent about $100 million in lobbying and contributed over $18 million to political campaigns. Most of that money flows to politicians, both Republicans and Democrats, who sit on the committees that determine annual defense spending. It is clear how high the stakes are for the defense industry. Private contractors can expect to receive a big chunk of whatever spending Congress earmarks for defense since the start of the war in the Middle East. For-profit defense contractors have received as much as half of the $14 trillion that the Pentagon has spent on defense. The defense industry often uses its influence to lobby for policies contrary to U.S. interests and values. In September 2021, members of the Congress tried to limit U.S. arms sales to Saudi Arabia, which is using U.S. weapons to sustain a brutal war in Yemen. The UNICEF has called the ongoing war in Yemen one of the largest humanitarian crises in the world. But weapons manufacturers spent millions lobbying Congress and the White House to allow arms sales to continue. The measure to limit arms sales was defeated. Saudi Arabia, ostensibly a U.S. ally, has since supported the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together. Eisenhower initially planned to give his farewell address before Congress. Ultimately, however, he delivered his warning about the military-industrial complex to the public. If Eisenhower suspected that Congress would not be able to stand up to the growing military-industrial complex, he was right, because by then, most of the congressmen were already puppets. They had infiltrated the Senate, the House of Reps, which comprised the House, the Congress. And that is exactly what Adam Weishaupt laid down in his Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which I guess I should go over those, but not here, maybe on my Rumble. It's an outline on precisely how these invaders, these neocons, would ultimately infiltrate and invade the United States government from within. So the conventional wisdom is that cuts to the Pentagon's budget will be punished by voters for being weak on defense, but the evidence doesn't stack up. All 85 congressional representatives who supported a cut to the defense budget won re-election in 2022, including several in competitive districts. Politicians who write blank checks for the Pentagon might be afraid of their donors, not their constituents. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So Eisenhower suspected that Congress would not be able to stand up against this growing military-industrial complex. Despite the increasingly partisan dysfunction on Capitol Hill, one bipartisan consensus seems ironclad. The defense budget must rise. Okay. Congress has long failed to perform its oversight responsibilities over the military-industrial complex, as Eisenhower feared. The powerful machine of money and interest has redefined security to mean whatever creates the most profit, circumventing democratic norms to do so. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry will be able to hold Congress accountable. That is so true. Now, when JFK also came into office, he did warn us about secret societies. And I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but that is another indicator that JFK, well, besides the fact that he was taken out, was obviously a white hat. One second. I want to welcome everybody who is in the house. I have over 852 people that are watching. Thank you for being here at this time. It is Monday night, February the 17th, and we are here broadcasting from the studio. Well, the office within the studio. All right, let's see. One second. All right. President Kennedy's special message to Congress on urgent national needs. This was recorded in May 25th, 1961. Let me just make sure this is the right one, where he warns about the dangers of secret societies and secret clubs. I think this is it. Let me check. If not, then I will actually get it from my book The Secret Government, which, again, guys, I'm doing my best to get it out in print once again for everyone to read. All right, so I have the evidence here on the Secret Government. You know, when I published this book in 2008, I was talking about all this. I was talking about white hats and how Nasera came into being, which now, you know, it evolved into Gesera. Now that we have over 22 countries that have signed the Ally Treaty against the NWO, and over 100 countries that are also aligning now with a total of 124 countries that are fighting and resisting the NWO. But this is, one second. Oh, there we go. Evidence of a conspiracy. Evidence of a conspiracy. So I guess even going back to as far back as Franklin Roosevelt, President Franklin Roosevelt wrote a letter to Colonel Edward Mandel House, President Wilson's close advisor. He said, "The real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that the financial element, the international bankers, and the larger centers have owned every government since the days of Andrew Jackson. That there is such a thing as a cabal of power brokers who control government from behind the scenes has been detailed several times in this century's incredible sources." So this is coming from President Franklin Roosevelt, going all the way back to even 100 years ago, I believe, right? Let's see. I'm trying to find JFK's address and his warnings to the American people. It's almost here. One second. How is everyone doing? I want to welcome all 900 people in the house. Welcome on today on this beautiful Monday evening, which is President's Day. We are doing a history of the presidents that were not in alignment with the cabal, those that were loyal to the Republic and to the original Constitution, which we would call today the White Hats. Of course, that plan was set into motion and in stone when Eisenhower came into office, along with Valiant Thor, and it was also fortified by the aerospace tycoon who was not invited to these special secret groups known as the military-industrial complex. And it is a plan that is now coming to fruition today by 45 and the people behind him. All right, so one second. I'm looking for the famous speech by President Eisenhower. No, I'm sorry, President Kennedy. I don't know if it's here. Well, in either case, I don't know if I recorded in my book as far as like evidence coming from actual presidents and prime ministers who, of course, had bumped heads with these globalists. But in either case, Kennedy did mention before his death that he was warning the American people regarding the secret societies that are a bigger threat than nuclear weapons. But I want to read it in his words because, I mean, the way he said it was so profound and so real, you know, so truthful. One second here, guys. Let me see. Yeah, I guess I didn't include it in my book, or The Secret Government. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and see if I could pull it up on my phone. One second, guys. I want to welcome all 907 people that are in the house, 914 that are in the house. Oh, here we go. I found them. Okay, I found them. So these are quotes by by U.S. presidents that have pretty much tried to warn the American people about these secret organizations. So this is coming. The very word secrecy. This is coming from JFK. JFK. Oops. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. No war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear and its presence has never been more eminent. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its spheres of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No no expenditure is questioned. No rumor is printed. No secret is revealed. This, my friends, came from the very words of John F. Kennedy himself. May he rest in peace. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. There is one more speech he gave. He says, "This is a clandestine chess game that the highly level ruling class are playing, my friends." And what he meant is they're playing those that are in Congress, the Senate, and the House of Reps. That's what he meant, my friends. They're playing my friends, or at least what he thought were his friends. Of course, we know that over 80% of the people that occupy those positions were compromised. So this danger and chaos, whether it be personified through a charismatic dictator, terroristic organizations, mystery virus, hostile weather change, or he was talking about all the stuff that they implemented, in the later decades. He knew what was happening. Is then weaponizing to strip people. Well, let me continue. This danger and chaos, whether it be personified through a charismatic dictator, terrorist organization, mystery virus, hostile weather change, or some other strategically inflated threat, is then weaponized to strip people of their introductory logic and rational thought, inculcate elaborate illusions that invert objective reality, weaponize the unconscious tribal mindset against the conscious thinking individual, suspend ordinary peacetime laws in favor of a new authoritarian law, and then present solutions that serve to further consolidate and establish power and reshape society as they see fit. My brothers and sisters, those were words that were delivered by JFK before they took him away from us. But I wanted to acknowledge him and his diligent work and his bravery for the American people. And we do know that his son is still alive. Thank God. He faked his death. And we're just waiting for a dramatic return and restoration of what I call the Second American Revolution. Well, I mean, when you think about it, this is our Second American Revolution. What's happening now, right, is no different than what happened in 1850 or 1860 when the Southern states decided to split from the Republic. In fact, I've come to understand, as I revealed in my book, The Secret Government, I'm working on reprinting this, guys. I'm getting it out there for everyone to read about, right? This was like, I was light years ahead of my time, published in 2008. Of course, it got into the hands of somebody who said I was revealing way too much, and they decided to blackball it. And all of a sudden, went out of circulation. My file was gone and everything. So what I'm doing is I'm actually rewriting the whole book into my Word document here, so that I could republish it. And this time, because the White Hats are in control, I don't think they're gonna block this from circulating again. But anyways, going back to the split, the first American Revolution. From what I've come to uncover, based on my vast research, is that Alexander Hamilton was for a central banking system against a republic. He was actually an infiltrator, and he worked for the Rothschilds, just like J.P. Morgan and the Rockefellers. And they actually completely managed to infiltrate many of the southern states. And that's how the Southerns, or what we call the Confederate States, eventually broke off from the Union. It was their famous method of problem reaction solution, right? They create the problem, right? So they wanted to first divide the republic when it was still in its early stages, right? Only 120 years old, right? To break it from within. And from what I've come to understand is that the forces, the financiers that were actually orchestrating and financing the southern states were no other than the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. All right. And then, of course, we do know that Jefferson opposed Hamilton, right? Because Alexander Hamilton wanted more centralized federal government control and less independent states, right? And then, of course, Jefferson said, no. We want to make sure that we honor our Constitution and that each state is capable of making their own laws, of course, along as they are aligned with the Constitution of the United States government. So from the beginning of the Republic, there was an infiltration. When, for instance, before Lincoln's death, he kind of exposed, he even said, hey guys, I know who's going to eliminate me. He talked about the Society of Jesus, right? The Jesuits. Well, they knew that the Jesuits were not allowing for the Republic to continue, right? They wanted to destroy the Republic because in their psychotic mind, they wanted to resurrect the Holy Roman Empire. And that is what's happening right now. It's just under a new name, the Holy Roman Empire, the NWO, same thing, right? Same tyranny, just under a new name. So with that in mind, I wanted to, thank the White Hats for what they're doing. They've been very, very vigilant, very, very, very courageous, despite the fact that the Nacera and Gessera documents were going to be released prior to 2001. You guys know what happened in 2001, right? September. It is believed that those records were actually in one of the towers. That they just, you know what I mean. I want to speak in codes, right? So the whole point is that the White Hats were in a position back in 2000, at the end of 2000, from what I understand, to bring about the end of the the military-industrial complex, to bring about the end of the Babylonian fiat money system, and really just restore a U.S. Treasury backed by precious metals, and bring all that wealth back to the people. And so they had all the evidence, right? The whole Nacera movement started with a few farmers who were complaining about how the government was taking away their farmlands, right? So they took it to the Supreme Court. And then when it went to the Supreme Court, the judges at the Supreme Court looked into the situation and realized that that these agencies, or what they called these people that were trying to take away the farmers' land, were actually working in cahoots with the international bankers, or may I say the corporations. And that's when they knew that the corporations were actually the ones running the show, not the Constitution anymore. And so eventually, I believe that it was Mr. Billclinton, who was actually forced at GUN PO by the White Hats to sign the National Security and Reformation Act, the NSARA law, back in 2000. And right when they were about to release those records, when they found out that our Constitution was violated, that the not only was the Federal Reserve privately owned institution, but also that the IRS was illegally ratified or illegally established. They were going to abolish everything back in 2000. And of course, what ended up happening was, the rest is history. You guys know what happened. I'm not going to tell you what happened, in 2001 in September. That's all I'm going to say, right? So yeah, they completely destroyed the building that had those documents. But it's not too late because they are now once again in a position militarily and also in terms of having resources and having many nations that are backing them up. See, before it was just a group within our Constitution, right? The guardians of the Republic, those that remained faithful to the original Constitution. Hence, Andrew Jackson, who opposed the Federal Reserve, Lincoln, and a few other presidents, including Eisenhower, Kennedy. I don't know about Nixon. I think Nixon was 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I think he was playing both sides. Some say Ronald Reagan. There was several attempts at his life that, some say Ronald Reagan, even though he was a Hollywood actor, was also a white hat. But what we do know is that every president, with the exception of those that I mentioned, were completely compromised. And of course, in 2013 or 2012, 45 was approached, right, after having his uncle, John, I'm not going to mention his last name, 45's uncle John, he goes by the name of John, after coming back from several time travel excursions, as he was best friends with Nikola Tesla, informed him of the dire dangers and the importance of him running for presidency. And then of course, 2016 rolled by, and at the end of 2016, we had the 17th letter of the alphabet and other sources that were revealing the truth about, who the good guys were, and that it's not all gloom and doom, and that we're not all going to be forced and chipped into this one world, tyranny, and that there is hope, and that there is a covert battle taking place between the good guys and the bad guys. And from what I've come to understand is that even some of the bad guys that were part of the Committee of 300, as they call themselves, right? The elites defected from the dark side, you could say, and joined the White Hats in their efforts to tear down and expose the dark side. So now we are once again in a key position, my friends. Not only the digital warriors here and all the galactic Jedis out there that are doing their job and their part in the Great Awakening, but we also are in a key position where our military and in collaboration with over 122 countries, including the guy from RUSSIA, right, Mr. PUTIN, kicking butt. Now we are in a global position to take down, this international synarchist. That's all I'm going to say. And with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and take some questions and answers at this time. I've been talking for about 45 minutes, I believe. So if you guys have any questions, please put them in capital letters, and I will go ahead and answer your questions. How's everyone doing out there? I want to welcome Stacey, Terry J, Sandy Klingoing, The House, Sharon Rowe, author Joe Holt, Matthias Chronicles, Lynn Bloom, Lobra Hassami, Ananda C, Stacy Radiant Glory or Radiant Guardians, Leela Hutchins, Simone S, Chastine Rose, Margaret Doricher, Stella, David Hake, Sylvia Vidal, Jimmy W, Joanna, Andrea Kraber, Joseph Martin, Ricky Lee 1111, Linda Hamilton, Infinite Goddess, and all 1,047 people that are in the house. Thank you guys for being here on this beautiful President's Day. It's a good day in history, considering that not all of the presidents were compromised. Otherwise the plan would have never existed, guys. And really, like I mentioned before, the plan really goes back to the original Masons before they were infiltrated by Adam Weissaup's Bavarian Illuminati. Anyways, who were, of course, under the control and direction of the Jesuits. See, all roads, when it comes to this deep, dark cabal, it seems like all roads lead back to Rome, right? The resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. Oh, God, get over it, cabal. You couldn't exert absolute tyranny and control during those days, right? And you're not going to do it again. Your time is up. All right, so I'm going to just go ahead and just take some questions, guys. All right, Glenn Frey is asking me, what rays brought the moon here? Well, I don't know. Are we referring to the original organic moon that was actually destroyed by Marduk, the son of Enki, when he destroyed Lemuria? Or are we talking about the artificial constructed moon made out of some sort of metallic alloy? So if we're talking about the artificial moon that we see today, that was hauled into our solar system from Orion by the negative Anunnaki, the Igigi, and those that were aligned with Enki, in order to keep us in this samsara cycle of reincarnation, to continue harvesting our energies, right? LOOSH. They created LOOSH farm here in our solar system, right? All right, so that's who brought in our moon, our fake moon, that is. It was brought in by the negative alien syndicate, the puppet masters of the Cabal families, pretty much. I do want to acknowledge Lawana Patterson. Thank you so much for being here and for your super chat, sister. Jimmy W is saying, white hats were always around. Archangel Michael's legions. That is so true. And that's one of the things that I actually talk about in my book. I connect the battle between the good guys, I call the Brotherhood of Light, the Melchizedek Sisterhood and Brotherhood of Man, and the Luciferian Brotherhood of the Snake, all revealed in this book. And yes, the battle here between the white hats and the dark hats is a last round that began millions and upon millions of years ago between Michael and Lucifer. Right? There is no difference between what the Cabal is doing here on a single planetary level of reality than to what Lucifer was doing, but on a universal scale of reality. Lucifer was trying to bring tyranny to an entire universe. Thank God that Archangel Michael was there to kick his fanny. Yes, Lucifer was trying to wipe out free agency, free will from all life forms in our universe at one point, under the control of the AI god, of course, who compromised Lucifer. Even Lucifer was once part of the Guardian Alliance, believe it or not, guys. He was once a great angel, archangel of God, in charge of the 11th creation. But he fell. He fell from grace. Let's see. Any more questions? I'm just going to read random questions. Ricky Lee, yes, I did see the Tucker PUTIN interview. In fact, on my Rumble Uncensored 2 Fridays back, I go over the highlights, brother. So make sure you guys watch my 2 Fridays back Uncensored on Rumble. It's all there. So this is when I was broadcasting from the Hilton when I was over at the Conscious Live Expo. I'm just looking for questions, guys. Go ahead and ask me any question you guys want. I am here for you. Yes, the Brotherhood of the Snake goes back to ancient Atlantis. It's actually intimately tied into Enki, Poseidon, the great trickster. He was actually the snake in the garden, by the way. The snake that was metaphorically camouflaged as the apple incident. But the knowledge that he was going to give was not about spiritual liberation, it was about transhumanism and technology. That was the knowledge that Enki wanted to. In other words, they were trying to implement transhumanism um, even during the days of Atlantis. But thank God for Enlil Sus who blocked that and prevented transhumanism from happening. I want to welcome Joyful. Thank you so much for your super chat. Her question is, Ishmael, are the CMEs powerful? The last week, I feeling very tired and no ambition. Will I get better? Well, it seems joyful. It seems like you're having ascension symptoms. Okay, so when you are having ascension symptoms, it means that you have to do more things that are going to alkaline your body, that are going to raise your frequency. Because what's happening is that your body is absorbing the higher fifth dimensional gamma ray frequencies, and if you're still dealing with negative emotions, or if you're still holding on to things that might make your body denser, it might cause physical symptoms to appear or to experience as a result of that. So it is known that yesterday, Sunday, um, we were blasted. We were blasted by some powerful CMEs. And, take it easy, guys. Take some time off for yourselves. Maybe I should take my own advice. Take some time off for yourselves, drink a lot of water, keep yourself hydrated. And if you need to rest because your bodies are going through a genetic upgrade, then do so. Honor your body. Remember this: self love is God love. Okay. Self love includes putting your health first at all times and honoring your body. So, yes, this last couple of days we've been hitting hard. We've been hit hard with some powerful CMEs. Pamela John 24 is asking any word on when Sarah might be kicking in. Well, I wish I knew the time and the date, guys. I'd be the first one to announce it. But the way the military works is that because of the fact that they're the cabal is still hanging by a thread, they don't announce their plans. They just do things without warning. Right? It's going to come by. It's not going to come by expectation, but it's going to come like a thief in the night. And when it does come, um, humanity is going to be rejoicing. So I don't know exactly when the Sarah's coming, but what I do know is that 2024 will be the year, whether it's now, whether it's in the summer, or during November, right? All roads lead to what happens this November. But from what I understand is it looks like the White Hats have the upper hand. So it might happen before November, or it might not happen before November. It might happen by the end of the year. But what I do know is that it's expected any day now. And that's all I'm going to say without giving any dates or anything. Sunshine, thank you so much for your wonderful super chat, sister. How you doing? Will you read my message after the live? I ended up posting it on YouTube, and I'll post it again in this chat. It's long, so read it when you have. It's long, so read it when you have time. Not now. Thank you. All right, I will, sister. And what I'll do is actually, as soon as you post your message, I'm going to go ahead and take a picture with it, with my phone, in case they delete it again. Okay, so that way I can read your message. So as soon as I'm done with the live, you post your message. I'll take a picture right? I'll take a picture with my phone, save it, read it later. And then I also wanted to acknowledge, hey NGO, who is in the house. Thank you so much for the number one and for your donation. Thank you for the super chat. I also want to acknowledge and thank author Joe Holt for his super chat. Love and light from one fragment of prime creator source to another. Oh, I love the way you stated that, from one fragment to another. That is so true, brother. We're all just fragments of one cosmic consciousness, right? We are. Just got a hardcover of our cosmic origin, and I am enjoying the journey. Ah, thank you, brother. You are going to be just remembering, because that's what it boils down to. It's not so much me revealing what was once taken from the earth when they destroy the Library of Alexandria, restoring all this cosmic information, but it's really just triggering your own memories of what you've already known. And um, what's really, you could say, stored within your own DNA, by the way. We are the Akashic records, guys. We are the Akashic records. It's not a physical thing. It's not a place or a set of manuscripts. It's actually our own memories of all of our lifetimes, of all of our past experiences that are going to be unfolding or unraveling as we undergo ascension. So we are the Akashic records. Remember that, or they are within our genetic structure. I'm glad you ordered our cosmic origin, brother. You are going to love it. All right, Sunshine, thank you so much for your donation, sister. You are amazing. Thank you, thank you. I love your little heart and prayer and crown emoji. That was very thoughtful of you, my sister. After all, guys, in this new earth, every human being will have the ability to be themselves and who they are, and the ability to be a king and a queen unto themselves. There will be no more hierarchy. There will be no more centralization of power, no more halves or half-nots, but every person will be uplifted and exalted in the new earth. So each and every single one of you guys is a king and queen in the making. So I'm just going to scroll all the way down to see if we have any new questions from any of the galactic Jedis that are in the house. I want to welcome all 11,125 people who are in the house. Thank you so much for being here. And don't forget to watch the replay, guys. We went over the segments of the history of the White Hats, the good presidents from bad presidents, and some of the most powerful speeches that acted as warnings to not only future presidents, but also the American people in the exposure of this cabal. And while you're at it, please don't forget to subscribe and share this video with as many people as possible. Let's continue expanding the knowledge. Let's see. And thank you for all the love and all the likes here. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just reading some of the chat. Well, okay. Let's see. Someone's asking about Sasquatch. The Sasquatch are the Yeti. The Yeti have a habitat within the inner earth, and they do travel to the surface world through portals. And that explains why a lot of humans have encounters with, the Bigfoot. Let's just call them the Bigfoot, right? In mountains and in forest, because that's where they appear the most. Of course, they will not access, or they will not come into the city, because some of them are anywhere from 8 to 12 feet tall. They would completely scare humans if they did so. And they're actually benevolent. They are very telepathic. They don't use words to speak. So if you are ever in a situation where you encounter a Yeti, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, all describing the same entity, he or she will read your energy and know that you mean no harm. All right, because they are very telepathic, and they won't attack you. By the way, they won't attack you. For those that don't know my galactic origin, I am a Lyran by birth, meaning when I first came into this universe in an avatar body, I popped into existence within the Lyran system on a planet called Avion. As a Lyran, as an early Lyran, one of my first embodiments was a 7 or 8 foot tall cat with a hominid body and the lion of a, the face of a lion, the lion of a face, the face of a lion. So that was my first incarnation in this universe. I also experienced myself in Sirius as a blue avian. I have an incarnation there. So I am a mixture. I am a soul hybrid. You know, I share different genetics from across the universe. I have also have an aspect of myself that comes from the Andromedan galaxy. I have an aspect of myself that comes from the Pleiades, and I was also I had a life in Atlantis and in Lemuria and even in Hyperborea. I wasn't here though when Polaria was around, which goes back to 40 million years ago. So that's just a little bit of my galactic and cosmic heritage for those that didn't know. All right, so this is a good question from Cosmic Key 2.0. Ishmael, when will valiant Thor come forward to join humanity after the storm? Well, as soon as the White Hats come into, you could say, into power, decentralizing, of course, the old, the old guard, ushering in a jubilee for the rest of humanity. That's when there's going to be, and I mentioned this before, there's going to be different layers to the disclosure. There's going to be the first layer, which is going to just expose all the corruption and all the treason. There's going to be another layer that's going to expose, the children, what's been going on in the underground networks that have now been cleared, I believe, with the exception of those in Africa, underway. And then there's going to be a third layer of exposure, explaining the interdimensional connection to off-world entities. And that's when the religious people are going to have difficulty digesting. It's going to be the cognitive dissonance that they're going to have is going to be it's going to be harsh. You could say it's going to be harsh, but yes, soon, all of these off-world helpers that are working with the Earth Alliance are going to be revealing themselves and are going to be interacting with us. But again, it's a dual process, guys. We also have to collectively jump into fourth density Earth to even interact with them because they don't have a third dimensional avatar like we do. So as we continue rising in frequency, right, the Schumann resonance is rising, our planet is moving into a higher density, then we are eventually going to be interacting with the ETs that have always been here, but on a different dimension. So it's not like they're out there, they're here, all right? All of the different types of advanced civilizations are not a location in time and space. They're all occupying the same space and time. What differentiates our reality to theirs is just the rate of vibration. Everything is existing within the light energy spectrum of the cosmos. Well, okay, so Taiso07770 is asking me if I could enlighten you guys on the Vrl. Well, the Vrl has to do with 0 point energy, all right? There are different ways of tapping into that 0 point energy. We have the 0 point energy, right? Through the activation of our light body, we access 0 point energy, right? We are a toroidal field, right? We are a sphere of light, right? We're not just this crude body, right? Our body is just a third dimensional layer of our other bodies that are invincible to the naked eye. So we are a sphere as well. So learning to tap into your own 0 point energy requires a lot of mental discipline and meditation, okay, and practices, spiritual practices. However, within the private sector and as practiced by many interdimensionals and extraterrestrial races, when they are able to tap into zero point energy, whether it is by tapping the planetary power of their own sphere or their own planetary field, right? The toroidal field of their planet, or whether tapping into the toroidal field of their star. Those are different levels of tapping into zero point energy, which is an unlimited amount of of energy, right? Tapping. It's like tapping into a vacuum of unlimited energy potential. And there are different levels of tapping into that. The biggest level of tapping into zero point energy within our construct is the galactic core, which is the biggest toroidal field that is spinning our galaxy. If you're able to tap into the galactic central sun, you're going to be indivisible and super powerful. So that is what the Vrl is. The Vrl is pretty much just zero point energy, right? Which was a technology that was given to the secret society of the Germans, right? Maria Ostrich and her circle of channelers by the Nordics of the Aldebaran star system in the early 1915s, 1920s. And then, of course, later we do know that it was Hitler who hijacked some of the blueprints in the development of the Haunebu series, which later became the Bell. And then, of course, we do know that later he struck the deal with the Draconians that allowed him to perfect anti-gravity aircraft, at which point the Nazis were the first to access the Vrl, which is zero point energy. Unfortunately, right? But it's okay because we've already kicked their butt in space by the super soldiers of Solar Warden and Radiant Guardians. Any more questions? Yes. The Nazis actually stole the blueprints to begin the development of what later became the Haunebu series, which evolved into the Bell. But the original blueprint was actually given to. It's funny because Maria Ostrich was also part of a secret society called the Vrl Society. They were so obsessed with the supernatural, metaphysics, and ancient documents. I mean, the Vrl, okay, the progenitors of the Vrl, their predecessors from the 1850s and 1860s, they were actually traveling to India and different continents to see if they could retrieve information on how to access zero point energy. So, this what led to the secret space program was over the course of 70 or 80 years. It all started in the 1850s, to be technical. But yeah, it all began with the Vrl, which is a hidden inner society that operates as the inner core of the Thule Society, which, of course, we know was the German secret society that Hitler was a part of. The Thule. All right, so I do have some more super chats that I need to address. Thank you, Sylvia Vidal. She says, Ishmael, are you going to have a video library and be able to go live on your website? Very soon, guys. Very soon. I'm going to be able to go uncensored, and I'm pretty soon on my website. I'm working on that. I'm hoping to have that up and running by no later than the first week of March. And then I'm going to be able to once again offer my classes, by myself, without anybody else teaching tarot or astrology or anything. I'm going to go solo and be my own cosmic professor. And I'm going to be offering 3 levels of cosmic teachings, fundamentals, right? For those that are, like on the path of like first layer awakening. I don't want to overwhelm them with too much information. And then there's going to be an intermediary second level of learning. And then finally, I'm going to offer an advanced super class for those that are ready to tap into the quantum field, or those that are ready to work with the Vrl, with zero point energy, and much more, of course. And with these classes comes vast cosmic knowledge, knowledge that, I've shared here and there, but not all of it. There's just so much that I want to share, guys, but, it's all in divine timing, of course, because if I were to share everything that I knew, like if I were to give you guys everything that I know, some of you guys would be like thinking, like, if you're not fully mentally and spiritually at the level to integrate and digest what I want to share, you would probably think that I am crazy. And so that's why I don't share everything I know. I want to welcome Lynn McLaren. Thanks so much for the super chat. Jimmy W in the house. What's up, brother? Thank you so much for the super chat. Your question is Chasting are asking, what about Iran trying to set up base in Antarctica? Well, right now, it seems like every country's trying to set up base in Antarctica, but it's, this is the way I see it, guys. Antarctica, as I speak, is probably the last battleground between the deep state and the white hats. And the reason being is because, there are so many layers deep within the Antarctica regions. As they continue to excavate, they continue to find more, advanced technology, right? Skeletal bones that belong to giants that range from 12 to 48 feet. All the evidence is there. The pre-Adamites, as they would call them. But what they've also discovered was a huge underground city where the reptilians used to, hide and existed. And that's why Hitler went there, by the way, because of the subterranean reptilian stronghold that exists deep within Antarctica. So as I speak right now, Antarctica is probably going to be the last thing that the Earth Alliance, in collaboration with the Guardian Alliance races, are going to cleanse before we have a full planetary announcement of, of course, the truth of what's been going on. But Antarctica is shrouded with so much mystery. It's probably the most mysterious continent on the planet as I speak. And I had an opportunity to talk to my buddy and friend, Brad Olson, who actually physically traveled to Antarctica. And he said when he went over Antarctica with the plane, that he saw it as a continent. Because I asked him, is it true that Antarctica is a wall of ice that surrounds the entire planet? And he says, no, man. He goes, I saw it physically through the plane as we descended and then ascended, and it's just a continent, man. It's not a wall. I'm like, all right, well, there's the proof, that the Earth isn't flat. But anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there. That for those that have traveled to Antarctica, they say it's a piece of land. It's like a big island. It looks like like Greenland but smaller. From if you're on an airplane and stuff. It's not a wall. It's a continent. And then I have another super chat from author Joe Holt. Thank you, brother, for being here. Thank you so much for your super chat. My 11th book, written in 2020, is a unified quantum theory that explains the multi-conical singularity zero-point field and the Merkaba light body it creates. Would love to talk to you about it. Wow, you're speaking my language, brother. Definitely. Go ahead and if you could find me on social media, I am on Instagram under The Real Ishmael Perez, or Facebook under The Real Ishmael Perez. If you could even create an account, I will take the time out, author Joe Holt, and I will look for your DM and give you my personal email so that we could chat. Thank you, brother. All right, guys, maybe about 10 more minutes for Q&A. 10 more minutes. I'm looking for really good questions before I close today's live. I do have another super chat from Stuart Williams. Thank you, brother. And your question is? Do you know anything about the red dragon on the Welsh flag? Well, we do know that the Cabal families come from the red dragon, which is the lineage of Lucifer, Draco. The Welsh flag, well, that explains the British monarchy. For a long time now, the British monarchy has been controlled by the Cabal families. And like I said before, the Cabal families suffer from a high concentration of draconian reptilian genetics. As to why they've always interbreeded among themselves to keep the bloodline strong, right? That is probably the best way to answer your question, is that the British government or the British monarchy is a reptilian monarchy. And that's why animal emblem is the red dragon, as opposed to, those that come from the seed of King David and Solomon, of the original bloodline of the Holy Grail. Their animal emblem is the lion, right? So that's how you're able to distinguish between the righteous kings and queens of the original Holy Grail and the Babylonian um, corrupt kings and queens of the red dragon lineage, which could be traceable back to Babylonia, where they established their first stronghold after the fall of Atlantis. I'm looking for two more powerful questions, or generally good questions, that I think most people have. Okay, I'm going to address this because I am one of the first ones to reveal